Welcome to Positive Atheism English channel. From the book Atheism, There is No God, written by Gora, the atheist leader and freedom fighter. In the last episode, we were learning about the civilization. In continuation of it, today, the society that has been growing stronger in this way started slowly even in ancient times. The realization of the need to recognize morality was not so strong in those times. In the majority of people, self-discipline was rather rare. That's why moral codes became quite necessary for the construction of society. Today, because society has developed prolifically into many branches, the political system is strong. As a result, violators of morals are subject to punishment no matter wherever they hide. But in ancient times, the political system was not so strong. That is why, in those times of fear of God was used to assist the king. People came to believe that violators of moral rules would be punished by gods. Even the king was considered a representative of the gods. Fear of God was joined with the king's punishment and thus made sure that social regulations were obeyed. The idea of gods thus contributed to the needs of human civilization. The first need of man is to know the truth about circumstances. Accordingly, man imagined circumstances to be a creation of the gods. That is why gods are thought to be the first creators. Social construction is the second need of man. So later on, gods were also considered to be guardians. In order to rule, there must be a king and his army. So, among ancient gods, one god was considered a king. In the Vedic age, first Jas, then Indra and Vishnu later on were considered as chiefs. Marutis and Ashwins became part of the army. Similarly, Osiris in Egypt, Belmarduk in Babylon, Zeus in Greece, and Jupiter in Rome were shown to be chiefs. When one society conquered another, the gods of the vanquished became attendants to the gods of the victors. The gods of the Dravidians were joined with the gods of the Aryans. The Egyptian gods were subordinate to the Greek gods. Thus, as societies changed, gods too changed in the order of governance. Furthermore, because gods too were imagined on the basis of analogy to have human natures, relationships among the gods were arranged. Goddesses were thought to be wives of male gods and to have had progeny. Lakshmi was Vishnu's wife, Isis was Osiris' wife, and Horus was their son. Just like human families, divine families were also designed. Regarding the creator gods as also rulers of men is the second stage in the evolution of the belief in God. These two stages came one after the other. The reason is that man's social outlook also developed soon after. Ever since the second stage occurred, the belief in gods gained much more prominence. The primary reason for this prominence was the assistance that this belief provided for the establishment of morality, which was necessary for social construction. The kings, who were the heads of societies, also supported this belief. The fear of God among people helped their rule. The belief in God grew day by day due to royal support and worked its way into various human affairs. Even the attire and language became related to the belief in gods. Songs, poems, sculpture, paintings, music, dance, stories, and works of poetry all had God as their theme. In ancient times, human societies and the professions of people constituting them formed according to the geographical conditions. Agricultural professions were taken up in places where there were contrasts in seasons and plentiful rainfall. People became cattle keepers in places where there were meadows. Jungle dwellers became hunters. Those who lived in arid lands moved to fertile lands and looked after the crops. Among the societies which were formed in this way, people attributed qualities to gods according to their needs and professions. A rain god and a god of harvest were important for an agricultural society, and for highway robbers, a god of war was important. Different gods arose for different professions, and depending on the characteristics each god, various moral codes, arts, viewpoints, and customs came into practice. People who lived in the same society lived on the whole in the same way and differed from members of other societies. On account of these differences, people in those days used to live in tribes. Although hostilities among those tribes were then based on economic matters, they were also to some extent due to the gods they believed in. In each tribe, depending on the existence of their reverence for their gods, people built huge temples and installed gods in them. Thanks to royal support, the temples were built with great sculptural skill. There used to be extensive worship of the gods, sacrifices, and celebrations. This was the initial stage of theism. Although the idea of God, which was formed due to man's weakness, was supported by belief, the gods themselves could not be verified. Hence, as the material circumstances began to play a greater role in human affairs, the belief in an invisible God began to wane. Nevertheless, if the belief in God continued to be with the people for so long, there must have been other reasons. The foremost among them was royal support. The second was religious institutions. Gradually, there came to be priests, preachers, and religious teachers in societies. As the common man was busy being entangled in the material affairs needed for making a daily living, he had little opportunity or interest to think about the unseen gods. But he did have the faith in God, which he acquired through tradition. That is why the priest was needed to relate common man to God. The common man made the same offerings to the priest as those he would wish to make to God. By doing that, he remained content thinking that those offerings would be passed on to God. Since the priest always imagined that form of God which was unique to his tribe, he was deluded into thinking that God actually appeared to him. He thought of those same imagined things to be the boons and commands of God. Because common men thought that there was a close relationship between the priest and God, they had great trust in the words of the priests. But as the priest took so much care of the affairs relating to the gods that he had many opportunities to learn about the ins and outs of the belief in God. He could figure out that if one thought a little rationally, the idea of God could be exposed as pure falsehood. But because his livelihood and honor were dependent on his priesthood, he could not disclose it. Furthermore, because the offerings made to the priests would also grow as the faith in gods increased, the priestly class attempted to firmly plant the fear of God in people. Priests spread superstitions among people which would instill the fear of God in them in many ways. They staged many deceptions, calling them divine miracles. In the name of God, they ordained many moral codes useful to their self-interest. They tried through persuasion and threat and aided by intrigue to appropriate the positions of running the temples and also to shaggle people in superstition in order to ensure that the critical abilities among people necessary to determine truth and falsehood would not blossom. At one time, the chief of a society was also the head of its religion. But later, as political affairs multiplied, the head of the religion and the king became separate entities. But there was always an intimate relationship between them. The former through the fear of God and the latter through punishment, they both kept people under control and maintained social order, which was called dharma. We will continue the remaining chapter in the next episode. Thank you.
For more videos, please subscribe to this channel Positive Atheism and activate the bell icon.